Hello YouTubers out there, this is the Boob Wasteland Show with your host Jerry Saravia. So today I'm going to talk briefly about the new TV show Hannibal in reference to an episode that was pulled by the network. NBC chose to pull the upcoming fourth episode of Hannibal in the wake of the Boston Marathon bombings. This is according to Variety. Now the episode, which was slated to air on April 25th, depicts children who've been brainwashed by a woman played by Molly Shannon, to murder other children. NBC will instead air the fifth episode of this series, but there should be no continuity issues according to NBC. Now, what is odd about this is that, first of all, I don't really see the connection between what this episode depicts and the Boston Marathon bombings. Granted, one child was killed in the Boston Marathon bombings, in addition to two other people, but I don't see really the connection between one thing and the other. And once again, I gotta say, I don't fully understand what this has to do with the show, because this show, Hannibal, is based on Hannibal Lecter. As we all know, Anthony Hopkins played him in Silence of the Lambs, in addition to the film Hannibal in 2001, in addition to Red Dragon, which was originally filmed as Manhunter back in 1986 by director Michael Mann. So this character, that's what the basis is. And Mads Mikkelsen, who most of you might know as the villain from Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, plays the psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter. Now, what does Hannibal Lecter do? Now, I can't say if this is depicted in the show yet because I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on that. But Hannibal Lecter is basically a cannibal. Hannibal the cannibal. So unless they haven't shown any of his cannibal tendencies, and I imagine even for an NBC show, there's only so much they can really show, that's who he is, or at least that's what he becomes. So what is the issue between this particular episode that they decided not to air and the correlation between the Boston Marathon bombings? I don't understand. Now, sensitivity always plays a factor, whether it's television, more so television than with movies, but sometimes movies too. As most of you remember, and I mentioned this on a show, my other show, Jerry at the Movies, last year, that the film Neighborhood Watch was delayed, the release, and that starred Jonah Hill and a few other actors in it, Ben Stiller. It was delayed because of the Trayvon Martin shooting, and the title was changed to The Watch. Now, it's not that the actual incident that involved Trayvon Martin and his murder had any correlation whatsoever to do with this movie, because in this movie, The Watch, it's about people, armed neighborhood watchers, and they are armed, but they're after aliens, so who have invaded the neighborhood. So again, I don't see the correlation, but okay, so they delayed the release of that film until July, I think. Initially, I think it was supposed to come out in the spring. Now, with television, it's an odd set of circumstances because, again, unless this show Hannibal depicted perhaps a plot or a bombing of some kind and people were hurt, I can understand the sensitivity factor in regards to that. But this episode, yeah, okay, this sounds awful, what this episode is apparently about, but I don't, again, see the correlation. Now, Glee, about a couple of weeks ago, was able to air an episode that stirred a little bit of controversy, but it was aired nonetheless, about a school shooting. Glee. Now, the school shooting at Newtown, was a while ago, I guess, comparatively speaking. But there's still a sensitivity issue regarding that and guns, and yet this episode was allowed to air. I mean, how much time does one allow for sensitivity compared to this show, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything that's actually going on. I mean, in the news anyway, current news. So I'm a little confused about that. Now, I should point out that the decision to pull the episode was made by the Hannibal boss, Brian Fuller, who cited the country's cultural climate when talking with NBC. I didn't want to have anyone come into the show and have a negative experience. You know, the show is about a cannibal. I mean, might be some negativity associated with that already. You see, so it's kind of a built-in appeal. If you like Hannibal Lecter, the character is a colorful character, but he's a cannibal and a murderer. Now, with this episode, he goes on to say it wasn't about the graphic imagery or violence. It was the associations that came with the subject matter that I felt would inhibit the enjoyment of the overall episode. It was my own sensitivity, as opposed to, I guess, your viewers who might not think anything in reference to Hannibal when it comes to, or pardon me, in reference to the Boston bombings when it comes to Hannibal. I don't understand this. I don't see the correlation. Now, I want to bring up a good point that Bruce Willis once made, and I wish more people would take heed with his advice. This month, and it's appropriate to mention this, of course, and I've mentioned this before in a past show at some point. This month is the, let's see here, 18 years since the Oklahoma City bombing. So it was on this month, April. I think April 19th, somewhere around there in 1995. Now, at about roughly a month and a half later, came out the film Die Hard with a Vengeance, which starred Bruce Willis. Now, the story of the plot of that film deals with a serial bomber who's bombing, or threatening to bomb several locations in New York City. Succeeds with 2 bombings, I think. And Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson kind of team up to solve all these riddles in order to prevent more bombings. Bruce Willis was asked about this by the press. You know, was it too soon to release Die Hard with a Vengeance in light of what had happened at Oklahoma City bombing? And he said, you know, would trivialize the tragedy the actual tragedy in terms of discussing it with this film. In other words, a movie is still a movie, isn't it? And that's the truth. Die Hard with a Vengeance was not meant to mimic or deal with the Oklahoma City bombing situation. So why discuss a real-life tragedy with a fictional one? There is no real correlation, is there? And I wish more people would take heed with that advice that Bruce Willis gave back in 1995, because it's really true. You trivialize a tragedy when you just discuss it in terms of art. Art is meant to illuminate, at its best anyway. At other times, it's meant to evoke a response of some kind. Anger, love, fear, hate, whatever it is, a range of emotions. And in addition to that, it's also meant to deal with a situation in some way that you don't know how to deal with in real life. So therefore, art helps to articulate it. But that wasn't really the intention of Die Hard with Vengeance, because again, it had nothing to do with the Oklahoma City bombings. A matter of bad timing, perhaps. The film still came out, still did well at the box office. Not sure it was in anyone's minds, the Oklahoma City bombing. So we have to be careful about separating one thing from the other. If it happened to deal with the bombing of the Murray building, which is what Timothy McVeigh did in that film, then I could see the sensitivity factor, or federal government building. But that wasn't the case, and it didn't even deal with a lone nut, if you like. There's just no correlation. except when you instill your own correlation, when you instill your own sensitivity. So please stop doing this. And in particular with Hannibal. This is a show about a cannibal, and you're worried about an episode where a woman forces other children to murder other children. Sounds awful, but what show are we talking about here? And why you allow one thing, like Glee, and not the other? I don't know. Considering there's a gun control laws that are trying to be passed through Congress, which of course they failed to do, and all this madness regarding shootings and now bombings. I mean, it's just so much. But, you know, you can choose not to watch the show either. But if you're going to build a sensitivity around a show that has nothing to do with the actual sensitivity in regards to the bombings, then you're trivializing the tragedy. Don't discuss the tragedy in terms of a show about a fucking cannibal. Pardon my language. Okay. That's all I gotta say about that. I just wish they would take Bruce Willis's advice. It makes more sense to me. And of course, I'm sure we'll be talking about this in the future more often. There's always some sensitivity to something. And this is the Boob Wasteland Show with your host, Jerry Saravia, signing off.